In the winter of 1873, the German immigrant community in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, spoke in hushed, fearful tones about 11-year-old Emma Richter. This quiet, pale child could, within seconds, determine the day of the week for any date in human history, memorize entire conversations word for word after just one hearing, and recite the exact number of steps between any two buildings in her neighborhood. What modern science might today recognize as an extraordinary neurological condition was, to the people of 1873, seen as either a divine blessing or something far more sinister. But when Emma began using her remarkable abilities to uncover buried secrets, predict deadly accidents, and recite intimate details of crimes that supposedly no living person had witnessed, the community's amazement turned to terror. By spring, 3 men would be dead. 1 family would flee in the night, and Emma Richter herself would vanish without a trace, leaving behind only a leather journal filled with numbers that no one dared to decode. Before we continue with the chilling story of Emma Richter and the dark secrets her extraordinary mind uncovered in Milwaukee's German Quarter, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We bring you the most haunting historical mysteries every week. And let us know in the comments which state or city you're listening from. These stories happened in communities just like yours, closer to home than you might think. What the residents of Brewery Town didn't realize was that Emma's gift would expose a web of lies, betrayal, and murder that had been carefully hidden for nearly a decade, and that her mathematical precision would become their community's most terrifying nightmare. Milwaukee's German Quarter in 1873 was a bustling enclave of red brick breweries, modest wooden homes, and the constant sound of German voices mingling with English in the crisp Wisconsin air. The community of nearly 8,000 German immigrants had built their own little Bavaria along the shores of Lake Michigan, complete with beer gardens, traditional bakeries, and the familiar rhythms of old-world life transplanted onto American soil. The men worked in the breweries, Schlitz, Best, and dozens of smaller operations that made Milwaukee famous, while their wives tended gardens that produced the same vegetables their grandmothers had grown in the Rhineland. Heinrich and Greta Richter had arrived from Bavaria in 1861 with dreams of prosperity and their infant daughter, Emma. Heinrich found steady work as a brewmaster at the Kellner Brewery, a mid-sized operation that supplied beer to the growing city's thirsty population. Greta took in laundry and mending to supplement their income, her nimble fingers working by candlelight long after Emma had been put to bed in their small but tidy home on Galena Street. The Richters were unremarkable in every way except for their daughter. Emma had been born during the harsh Atlantic crossing, 3 weeks premature and so small that the ship's doctor doubted she would survive the journey. But survive she did, though she remained slight and pale, with enormous gray eyes that seemed to take in everything around her with unsettling intensity. As a toddler, she rarely cried or demanded attention, content to sit quietly in corners, watching and listening as the adult world unfolded around her. By age 4, Emma's parents began to notice something unusual. She could recite entire conversations she had overheard days earlier, complete with the precise inflections and accents of the speakers. She counted everything, the number of stitches in her mother's embroidery, the steps from their front door to the bakery, the exact time between the brewery whistles that marked the beginning and end of each workday. When Heinrich taught her basic arithmetic, she absorbed mathematical concepts with frightening speed, solving problems in her head faster than he could work them out on paper. The German community initially viewed Emma's abilities with a mixture of pride and unease. Old Mrs. Brennan, who claimed to remember the witch trials from her grandmother's stories, crossed herself whenever Emma's calculating gray eyes fixed on her. But Father Koller, the stout Bavarian priest who served their small Catholic parish, declared Emma's gifts to be a blessing from God, a child chosen to demonstrate divine wisdom in their New World community. The winter of 1872 had been particularly harsh, with temperatures dropping so low that Lake Michigan froze solid for the first time in a generation. The brewery workers huddled around coal stoves, their breath visible even indoors, while their wives struggled to keep their families warm and fed through the long, bitter months. It was during this isolated winter that Emma's abilities began to take on a darker character, though no one yet understood what was coming. Emma had developed the habit of sitting by the small window in their kitchen, watching the neighbors go about their daily routines with the same intense focus she applied to mathematical problems. She began to notice patterns, not just in numbers, but in human behavior. Mr. Kruger always walked to the brewery by the same route, taking exactly 247 steps, except on Wednesdays when he took a different path that required 284 steps. Mrs. Fisher hung her laundry in a specific sequence, but when her husband worked late at the mill, she changed the order completely. These observations might have been dismissed as the quirks of an unusual child, except that Emma began to vocalize her findings in ways that made the adults increasingly uncomfortable. The transformation from curiosity to dread began on a gray February morning in 1873. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table, methodically eating her breakfast while her mother prepared her father's lunch pail, when she suddenly looked up and announced, "Mr. Dietrich will not come home from the brewery today. He will die at exactly 14 minutes past 2 o'clock." Greta nearly dropped the tin pail she was holding. "Emma, in God's name, what a terrible thing to say. Why would you think such a thing?" Emma's gray eyes remained fixed on her mother's face with that unsettling intensity. "He has been drinking from the small brown bottle for 17 days. Yesterday, he drank 3 times more than usual. His steps were uneven, 251 instead of his normal 244. When people change their patterns by more than 10%, something significant happens within 72 hours. Mr. Dietrich's pattern changed by 12%. The calculation is simple." Heinrich, who had been putting on his heavy wool coat, stopped and stared at his daughter. Johann Dietrich was indeed a drinker, but no more than half the men in the German quarter. The idea that Emma had been counting his steps and tracking his drinking habits was disturbing enough, but her calm mathematical certainty about his death sent a chill through both parents that had nothing to do with the Wisconsin winter. "You must not say such things, Emma," Heinrich said firmly. "It's not proper for a child to speak of death." Emma simply nodded and returned to her breakfast, but her parents exchanged worried glances over her bent head. At precisely 14 minutes past 2 that afternoon, Johann Dietrich collapsed in the brewery's malt room. The official cause of death was heart failure brought on by what Dr. Mueller determined to be chronic alcohol poisoning. The brewery workers who found him noted that he had been acting strangely for weeks, drinking more heavily than usual and showing signs of severe anxiety. But what truly unsettled them was the timing. Emma Richter's prediction had been accurate to the minute. Word of Emma's grim prophecy spread through the German quarter like smoke from a chimney fire. Some dismissed it as coincidence, but others remembered the pale girl with the calculating eyes and began to wonder what else she might have observed during her silent vigils at the kitchen window. The Richter family found themselves the subject of whispered conversations and sideways glances when they walked to church or visited the market. Father Kohler, who had previously praised Emma's gifts as divine, now seemed less certain. When Heinrich approached him after Sunday Mass, seeking guidance about his daughter's disturbing prediction, the priest's jovial demeanor had been replaced by something approaching concern. "Heinrich, my friend," Father Kohler said, his Bavarian accent thick with worry, "perhaps it would be best if young Emma spent less time watching the neighbors and more time with her prayers. The Lord gives us gifts, yes, but sometimes the devil can twist even the most innocent abilities toward darker purposes." This suggestion troubled Heinrich deeply. He had always been a practical man, more concerned with the science of brewing than the mysteries of faith. But even he could not dismiss the unsettling accuracy of Emma's prediction. That evening he sat his daughter down for a serious conversation. "Emma, you must tell me the truth. How did you know about Mr. Dietrich?" Emma looked at her father with those enormous gray eyes, her expression as calm and analytical as always. "I watch. I count. I remember." Mr. Dietrich's behavior changed in predictable ways. When someone increases their alcohol consumption by 37% over a 17-day period while simultaneously reducing their food intake by approximately 20%, cardiac stress becomes inevitable. I calculated the most probable time of failure based on his age, weight, and observed symptoms. Heinrich felt his blood run cold. His 11-year-old daughter was speaking like a physician, or something far more troubling. But Emma, how could you know all these details about Mr. Dietrich's eating and drinking? I observe everything, Papa. Every day. Every person. Every pattern. Emma's voice remained matter-of-fact, but there was something in her eyes that made Heinrich deeply uncomfortable. Would you like me to tell you about the other calculations I've made? Heinrich quickly shook his head. He did not want to know what else his daughter had calculated about their neighbors' lives and deaths. But as he tucked Emma into bed that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that his family was standing at the edge of something much darker than a simple mathematical curiosity. In the weeks following Johann Dietrich's death, the atmosphere in Milwaukee's German quarter shifted like the wind off Lake Michigan. Emma continued her daily observations, but now her parents watched her with growing unease as she sat by the kitchen window, her gray eyes tracking the movements of their neighbors with mechanical precision. The child who had once been their pride had become a source of deep, gnawing worry. Greta began to notice that Emma's observations were becoming more detailed and more disturbing. The child would mention casually that Mrs. Weber had been meeting secretly with Mr. Kellner behind the brewery on Tuesday afternoons for 6 weeks, or that the Schneider family had been burying something in their back garden every Sunday after church. When Greta asked how Emma could possibly know such things, the girl would simply explain that she had observed the patterns and calculated the probabilities. People think they are being secret, Emma said one March morning as she methodically buttered her bread. But they follow patterns just like numbers. Mrs. Weber always tells her husband she's visiting her sister on Tuesday afternoons, but she takes 127 steps to Mr. Kellner's house instead of 349 steps to her sister's. The Schneiders bury objects wrapped in cloth exactly 73 centimeters apart in a grid pattern. They believe no one is watching, but I am always watching. Heinrich had heard enough. That evening, after Emma was asleep, he spoke seriously with his wife. Greta, this cannot continue. Emma is becoming unnatural. Children should not observe such things, and they certainly should not speak of them so coldly. Greta nodded, her hands trembling as she mended one of Heinrich's work shirts. I'm frightened, Heinrich. Not of Emma, but of what people will think. Already the neighbors look at us strangely. Mrs. Brennan crossed the street yesterday when she saw me coming. And Father Kohler has not visited us since Johann's death. Their fears proved justified when 3 days later, Emma made another of her mathematical announcements. She was helping her mother prepare dinner when she suddenly stopped peeling potatoes and looked up. Mrs. Weber will be discovered tomorrow at 11 in the morning. Her husband will find her with Mr. Kellner in the brewery office. There will be violence. Greta dropped her paring knife. Emma, you must not say such things. But Emma continued with the same mathematical certainty she applied to her arithmetic lessons. Mrs. Weber has been arriving at the brewery 7 minutes earlier each week for 6 weeks. Mr. Kellner has been staying 33 minutes later each day. Tomorrow, Mr. Weber will return from his delivery route 47 minutes early because his horse is developing lameness in her left front leg. I have observed her gait deteriorating for 11 days. The convergence of these 3 variables makes discovery inevitable. The next day unfolded exactly as Emma had calculated. Wilhelm Weber discovered his wife Anna in a compromising position with brewery owner Ernst Kellner. The confrontation that followed left Kellner with a broken nose and 3 cracked ribs, while Anna was beaten so severely that Dr. Müller had to be summoned. The scandal rocked the tight-knit German community, But what disturbed people even more was the growing realization that little Emma Richter had somehow predicted the entire sequence of events. As winter gave way to spring, the isolation deepened. The German quarter that had once felt like home now seemed hostile and threatening. Heinrich began to consider the unthinkable, leaving Milwaukee, abandoning the life they had built, and starting over somewhere far from the whispers and the fear and the terrible accuracy of their daughter's predictions. But Emma was not finished with her calculations. The worst was yet to come. Dr. Friedrich Müller, the community's physician, had grown increasingly curious about Emma's abilities. Unlike the superstitious whispers of the neighbors, Dr. Müller approached the situation with scientific interest. When Heinrich Richter approached him privately, seeking medical advice, Dr. Müller agreed to examine Emma. The examination took place on a rainy Thursday morning in the doctor's office above the pharmacy on Water Street. Emma submitted to the questions and tests with the same mathematical precision she applied to everything else. "Emma," Dr. Müller said in his accented English, "your father tells me you can predict when certain events will happen. Can you explain to me how you do this?" Emma looked at the doctor with that unsettling intensity. "I observe patterns and calculate probabilities based on established behavioral data. People believe their actions are random, but they follow mathematical sequences. When I have sufficient data points, I can predict future behavior with high accuracy." Dr. Müller leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "Can you give me an example?" Emma consulted her journal, flipping through pages of neat numerical notations. "Mrs. Brennan believes she is keeping a secret, but her pattern is quite obvious. Every Tuesday and Friday for 8 weeks, she has walked to the church at exactly 3:15 in the afternoon. But instead of entering for prayer, she continues to the rectory and remains for precisely 43 minutes. Father Collar's pattern has also changed. He has been purchasing extra candles and wine, and his evening prayers have extended by an average of 17 minutes on Tuesdays and Fridays. The correlation is statistically significant." After the examination, Dr. Müller spoke privately with Heinrich and Greta. "Your daughter's mind works differently than other children's," he explained. "She processes information in ways that seem almost mechanical. In my opinion, this is a medical condition, not the other things people are saying." But even Dr. Müller's scientific perspective couldn't diminish the growing dread that surrounded Emma's predictions. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in late April. Emma was sitting by the kitchen window, watching the street activity, when she suddenly looked up at her mother. "Mama, there is something wrong with the pattern today." Greta felt her hands begin to tremble. "What do you mean, Emma?" Emma consulted her journal. "Every Tuesday for 11 weeks, Mrs. Brennan has walked to the rectory at exactly 3:15. But today, she left her house at 2:47 and walked toward the river instead. Her behavior indicates significant distress. Her step length decreased by 12% and her breathing pattern was irregular. This suggests she is planning something final." The clinical way Emma discussed Mrs. Brennan's apparent suicidal intentions filled Greta with horror. "Emma, you must not speak of such things. Mrs. Brennan is a good woman. She would never." "The mathematical probability is 87%, Emma interrupted. "People who dramatically alter established behavioral patterns while displaying physical signs of distress typically execute irreversible decisions within 4 hours of the pattern change. Mrs. Brennan's pattern changed 43 minutes ago." Heinrich went searching for Margaret Brennan and found her standing on a dock by the river, staring into the dark water. He spent 2 hours talking her away from the edge. When he returned home, he found Emma making final notations in her journal. Mrs. Brennan did not follow through with her plan, she observed clinically. The intervention changed the probability calculation. "I will need to adjust my variables for future predictions involving third-party interference." That night, Heinrich and Greta made a decision that would change their lives forever. They could not continue living in Milwaukee. But the most devastating revelation came on the first day of May 1873. Emma looked up from her journal and said, "Papa, I need to show you something important. My calculations have revealed a pattern that explains everything." She opened her journal to detailed charts, maps, and numerical sequences. "For 26 months, I have been observing and recording the behavior patterns of 43 adults in our community. 7 men have been meeting secretly every Wednesday at midnight in the basement of Kellner's brewery. These 7 men have been involved in systematic theft from the brewery operations with estimated losses of approximately $47,000 over 26 months. She pointed to a detailed map. The theft operation required inside knowledge. My calculations indicate Ernst Kellner himself as the organizer. Heinrich realized he was looking at evidence of a criminal conspiracy uncovered by his 11-year-old daughter through obsessive observation and mathematical analysis. But Emma continued, "Mr. Kellner knows that I observe everything. He has been watching me watch him. 3 weeks ago, he approached our house twice at night and stood outside for 17 minutes each time. His behavior indicates he suspects I know about the theft operation. My calculations indicate we are in significant danger. The mathematical probability of them taking action against our family is 84%, with peak likelihood within the next 72 hours." That evening, Heinrich shared Emma's evidence with Dr. Mueller, who helped them flee Milwaukee immediately. As the Richter family loaded their few belongings into the doctor's wagon under cover of darkness, Emma made one final observation. "Papa, in approximately 6 months, the theft operation will be discovered through other means. Mr. Kellner will face justice, but 3 of the 7 men will not survive the investigation. The mathematical probabilities are quite clear." The Richter family vanished from Milwaukee in the early hours of May 2, 1873. By winter, a federal investigation exposed the theft ring. Ernst Kellner was arrested and convicted. Wilhelm Weber was found dead under circumstances ruled a suicide. Otto Steinberg died in what appeared to be a drunken accident. Hermann Kruger suffered a sudden heart attack suspiciously similar to poisoning. Emma's predictions had been accurate in every detail. After that, Emma Richter disappeared from history. Some researchers believe families with such unusually gifted children deliberately maintained their anonymity to protect themselves from both scientific exploitation and community persecution. Her story remains one of the few documented cases where such abilities were recorded in sufficient detail to understand their scope, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying discoveries come not from supernatural forces, but from the relentless application of mathematical logic to human behavior.